Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I'm a comic book artist, writer, creator, self publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI and sign up. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. You can head on over there and pick up copies of my books. I'm testing out sort of a new lighting setup. Instead of the camera that ring light I normally have in front of me, I've got two larger lights that are set up more for what I do when I'm when I'm doing illustration, because I was doing some traditional drawing at my desk. So I'm trying to figure out a way to have these books up here and show you the covers without the light blowing it out. The ring light was always giving me a reflection right off of the front that was kind of harsh. Now this is giving me an equally harsh reflection. So I'm still work in progress. But that's why there's book flip through videos on the homepage of my YouTube channel. All right. So today I have been spending more time working on the new comic. And I have not finished my outline yet because I'm just re-outlining and re-outlining. It's not that it's anything wrong. I'm pushing it as hard as I can. I want to be better than anything I've written before. So let's see. Oh, hey, already got people in the chat. I see Suretzi's in the chat. Hey, hey. I guess hey, hey is the official greetings for the stream. So hey, hey, Suretzi. And I see James in the chat as always. Good to see you. He said, just getting started. And he said, maybe I'm a wimp because I can't bring myself to draw when it's hot at night. I don't think you're a wimp at all. Drawing whenever there's something that's physically impeding you, something that's sapping your energy, is very, very difficult. I don't know. I mean, I'm one of those people for whom drawing can be a relief, but trying to sit at the drawing table when you're dripping sweat is very, very uncomfortable. So I get that. I completely recognize and agree with it. I have gone as far as putting ice packs on the back of my neck while I'm drawing to try and cool me off. But yeah, trying to draw during the heat wave that's hitting a lot of the country right now is rough. Let's see here. Suretzi gave us a LOL. James said the Fat Albert greeting. That's true. Hey, 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 hey. If I let that frog in my throat out, I can maybe really make it sound like Fat Albert. So anyway, the new comic that I'm working on is a Greek mythology story. And I started working on character designs for my version of Zeus. Let me turn off this reference layer. And while I was writing, I had a scene, I was basically kind of sketching out a large battle scene at the end, which Zeus takes a part of. And in sketching it out, I kind of had him in this pose, raised up with the him getting ready to throw a lightning bolt. And I thought, that would be a good kind of concept piece to do. So then I thought, let me just start sketching it out. And maybe this will end up being a cover. Maybe it's just a promo piece for me to help do some visual development for the story. I see Martin in the chat. Hey, 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 hey. Just gonna keep adding on haze until eventually the whole stream is gonna be one big hey. It's like Matteo Scalera at the end of the Ink Pulp podcast. But his is much more impressive. So James says, poses and expressions are a great way to give character personality. I take it. Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, that's one of the things for me, I almost feel like it's easier to do the character designs when I'm working on layouts, actually drawing poses, because I started there's a little thumbnail up here that I drew because I realized first, let me turn off this layer. So I started with where is the original sketch? And turn all this other stuff off. So I started with this sketch in my sketchbook. So this was actually, you can see the texture on it. Traditional artwork drawn on paper. And I took a snapshot of it. And he's kind of got sort of a Street Fighter type design look to him. And I thought, okay, to me, I thought this I can totally work up into a cool cover. So I was thinking maybe it'll be a cover for the comic, maybe it'll just be a cool concept piece. So I started by sketching on top of the that photo on on a low resolution. I mean, not low resolution, on a low opacity. I started tweaking the pose a little bit more. And then I realized as I was tweaking it that I was turning him a little bit more into a traditional heroic pose. Like he's muscular, but he does not feel Olympian. He doesn't feel like something that is greater than a mortal, like Zeus should feel. And so then I started thinking, oh, okay, I need to play with his proportions more and then draw the figure that has the proper proportions in the piece. And that's when I went and did this little thumbnail sketch of him and add a little bit of color to it. Let's see here. I see Chris is in the chat. Hey, Chris, good to see you. Thanks for dropping in. I'm doing a little bit of character designs for my next comic. Now, mind you, this is a very small sketch. So, if anything, as I was drawing this, it got me thinking, I actually need to do a little bit more work on his face, his facial features. So, you can see how I go from sketchbook sketch to working on a cover illustration to thumbnail of just a front view to work out the proportions better to I've got the figure kind of worked out and I'm happy with his costume is very simple, just a toga, just one shoulder going up and over. But before coming in here and doing the next step, which is adjusting the proportions of this pose so that it feels like this huge house of an Olympian god, I kind of want to let me take this layer. Let me take these layers and group these together so I can turn them off all at once. In fact, from my old Photoshop habits, I feel like I have to. I don't know about you guys. It drives me nuts to not have layers or at least layer groups named. It drives me nuts. I mean, yeah, in Photoshop you can just command click, control click, and go to a layer or a group and select it like you can in Illustrator. But this is just a habit from using Photoshop since the 90s. In that just organizing your layers and having them named is just a habit I can't get. It drives me nuts to not do it. So, hey, I see Red in the chat. Hi, Red. How you doing? Thanks for joining us. Doing some character designs here. Let's see here. So I'm just gonna call this group sketch so that I can name the one with the character thumbnail. I'm going to call it thumbnail because the next one I'm going to do is going to be face because I want to work out his face. I feel like I wanted to just have him have a big white fluffy beard and then when I start drawing the lightning bolts coming out from his eyes, I actually thought, maybe have some coming out from his beard as well. And maybe there is something to tying that in to originally I had it where he had a bunch of tied braids in his beard. So I've kind of gone back and forth between wanting to make him look like a cloud, making his beard look like a cloud versus this very Street Fighter looking beard. I think the Street Fighter looking beard looks cooler, so I may push back in that direction. This is the nature of character design. Sketching out, trying other stuff, just seeing what works. This is an interesting question. So Red says, "Cool art, Jeremy," and thank you for that, by the way. So, do you ever join comic competitions? Uh, I have not, and that is not because I look down on them in any way or think that because I have any negative view of them. I have actually told myself I could probably grow my audience and get my work in front of a lot more people if I started, entering comic competitions. Whether it's something on like ArtStation or DeviantArt or in a Discord server, or even just participating in Inktober or Mermaid or Smogist. Participating in these events is a great way to get your work in front of people. And the reason why I have not done it in the past is because, generally speaking, over the past 15 years, ever since I started publishing comics, I have generally had a project in front of me, whether it was a comic that I was working on or an illustration or series of illustrations. I usually had something I was working on, and I didn't want to take energy away from that just to enter a competition. But that said, I mean, I still think about it all the time, and in a positive way. I think, oh, I should do this. This would be really good for me as an artist, just helping getting my work out in front of more people. So I haven't tried it. Occasionally on the Patreon Discord, members of the group will throw out some art competitions that they see, some that are video game related. I think the video game related ones are probably really a good idea just because there's, a built-in audience that you're specifically trying to do work for. And I think what stops me in that case is really that I don't game anymore. I wouldn't say that I was a voracious gamer, but my gaming stopped after the PS1. I've told this story on live stream many times before, but I haven't told it in a while, so bear with me. It's not a long story. It's just the fact that I started working on Eye of the Gods seriously sometime in the early aughts. I think probably around 2005, 2006. And in that time, I think the PS2, I can't remember what year the PS2 came out, but it had already been out for a while. And I definitely wanted to get it. But I was thinking about how much time playing games would take away from writing and drawing comics. And so the deal I made with myself was, when I finished that graphic novel, it wasn't even when I finished that graphic novel I can get a PS2. It's when I finished that graphic novel, then I allowed myself to finish the game that I was currently playing, which this will take you back in terms of how far it was. It was a Final Fantasy VIII, I believe. So way, way back. And I said, all right, when I finish my book, I can finish playing this game, because I think the game was like 4 discs long. And I thought to myself, oh, well, I'll go away for 6 months, maybe a year. I said, I'll spend a year. I'll finish this graphic novel. I'll come back and I'll play the game. Book didn't come out to 2009. And maybe I took the wrong lesson away from that process, but what I ended up feeling was that as much as I enjoyed playing video games, it took too much time away from the creative process. So I kind of had to, I made a conscious choice to give it up. So I still, it's not like I tell people don't play game. I don't ever say that. I think that playing video games is a great release for creative people, for artists, writers. You can't do this 24/7. But nowadays, usually if I'm taking a break, it's doing something like going for a hike with my wife or just reading. Um, I still tend to take breaks that are creative breaks. So if I want to break instead of playing a game, I'll just read a graphic novel that I've been wanting to read for a long time. Um, I mean, that all goes away from the art competition thing, but the thing about video game competitions, because that's what I see most often online, is like, do your fan art of the characters from this new upcoming game. Those are the competitions I see the most. Um, Red says, I'm getting ready to join a competition in August. The new website is going to be live for competition. It's created by Nen. Um, hmm. Okay. Well, good luck in the competition. Is it something where it's a single illustration? Is it a is it a comic? 3D model? What kind of stuff are you doing? As I'm sketching this face and I realize I'm getting a little bit too caught up in details. I need to keep this leaner. So one of the things that I was thinking was trying to have his beard, as opposed to just having lightning running from his eyes, to instead of having his beard turn into braids at the end, or locks like dreadlocks, is to maybe have it turn into streams of energy. Same way he's got streams of energy coming out of his eyes. And by energy, I really mean it's lightning, but I'm being really loosey goosey with it at the moment. Oh, this is good. You guys are sharing some information there. Um, Chris was asking about where this competition is. Red says it's only 3 pages, and I only think about slice of life comic when it comes to 3 pages. He says, hold on, Chris, I got to check." If it's having trouble letting you post the link, because I don't think YouTube will let you post links in the chat for a stream, but you can just put the name of it, just the name of the competition or whatever's the most searchable term in it. That should go through fine. Um, well, in terms of that idea of doing something that's 3 pages and thinking slice of life, um, I don't know if you've ever looked at 3 panel crimes, but it is a great crime comic that is done in 3 panels. And I think that's an interesting thing to look at in terms of doing short stories, finding ways to tell a complete beginning, middle, and end in a very, very tiny space. Normally, when you think of short comics, you tend to think of humor strips. But I think there's something to, if you're treating it more just sort of like, here's a setup, here's a premise, and here's sort of an ending that isn't necessarily an ending, but sort of a creepy, ooh, like a short film. It doesn't have to tell you an entire narrative. In fact, the stories tend to be longer, but you could just take a look at something like Heavy Metal magazine or any anthology, any comics anthology that has short stories. That might be an interesting thing to look at. So let's see here. So Red mentions, okay, the channel of the competition is the owner of Webcomics Hub, and he says, go to his recent live stream and it'll tell you the rest. All right, so I guess the thing to check out is Webcomics Hub. Let's see what they've got there. Whoops, Stylus is trying to make a break for it. No, I totally think that you can make a compelling narrative in just 3 pages. It's just a matter of deciding what the constraints of that story are. I don't think it necessarily has to be slice of life. I mean, if slice of life is what you're interested in and that's what makes the most sense for you, then you should totally do that. But I almost feel like if you look at any TV show that has a cold open, meaning like a short little story about whatever that relates to what the overall movie is, like or overall TV show is. Like maybe it's something where it's like the Law and Order, where you show the crime happening in the beginning and the person dying at the end and the main characters haven't even showed up yet. That's something that I feel could make like a 3-page comic. Like if I were doing, like I said, this comic book that I'm working on right now is a retelling of a Greek myth. But let's say that I wanted to make a short story. Let's say I want to make a 3-page story about Zeus. Maybe I'd do something about the Titans, and I would do something about Kronos. Like page 1 is Kronos, and you show him eating all of his children because he has been told, prophesized that one of his children will kill him, will castrate and kill him, and you have that, and then you have him like ruling over the Titans as a monster, and then you see like the last one that he swallowed, and then maybe at the end of page 2, you see in his belly, you see all of these gods that will be, Olympian gods that are trapped inside of his body. And then you see a stone come falling down at the end of page 2. And you realize that the last one that he thought was the last child, his youngest child, Zeus, he thought he swallowed it. And then the end of the story is you see the Titan Rhea, Zeus's mother, eventually secreting away with Zeus to raise him. And that's the story. That's it. That's a 3-page story. So, it just has it doesn't necessarily have to end with a fight scene. It's just a story that sets up another story. So, but mind you, these are just ways that I think of. Like, I like to look at constraints I'm given and say, within the constraints I'm given, how can I do exactly what I want to do? So definitely don't take these suggestions as law. It's more about what do you, for instance, like if what you want to do is slice of life, then it's just a matter of saying, all right, how do you make a slice of life story that is compelling to you? And if what you'd really rather do is do a horror story or a comedy story, then it's a matter of saying, all right, how do I how do I make what I want to do meet the parameters of this contest? So I guess I'm curious, is slice of life what interests you? Or if you were just doing whatever you'd want to do, what type of story would you do? I mean, I don't want you to tell me the story that you're planning, but just I'm curious what you would like to do if you were just on your own, if it wasn't about a contest. Because I think those are the strongest things is when you're given an assignment, you find a way to make it the thing that you want to do. Let's see here. So Red says 3 pages. So I don't know if I could make a world building. And then James has a great suggestion. He says to look at EC Comics and Harvey Picar and Jim Valentino stuff. And I've been meaning for ages to read American Splendor because I have not read any Harvey Picar. I think I may have read some. What is it? I know he collaborated with Robert Crumb on some of the American Splendor stuff, and I think in a separate collection of Robert Crumb's comics, I may have read some of that, but I really have not read any Harvey Picar, and it's supposed to be, great stuff. And Paul says some sci-fi, which always sci-fi for me. That's sci-fi and fantasy. That's kind of my my go-to, my happy place there. And Chris says, make characters and make a comic. I don't know where to start, though. And then Paul says, I haven't read enough sci-fi. He says, I'm drawn to noir and detective stuff all the time. You know what's interesting is I am also a fan, given the fact that I have done a supernatural biblical Western, and I've done a psychological, thriller with conspiracy theories. I am a fan of the mashup. I love the idea of taking two genres that don't necessarily belong together, or you wouldn't instinctually put together, and then putting them together. And by that rationale, one of the things that I thought of when you mentioned noir, Paul, and when you mentioned sci-fi, is that it made me think about how pulpy the opening sequence of The Matrix is. Because when you've got him running around in those dark streets and he's being, chased, it's obviously bullet time. That opening sequence when we see Carrie-Anne Moss, when we see Trinity, and she's fighting those guys, and the camera rotates around her, and then she kicks the dude. That blew everybody's mind because no one had seen that before. But if you remove the technology and you remove that cool scene and the kick, and you just look at the filming of that sequence, the rain, the deep, dark shadows, the grim tone of it, very noir. Even just having Trinity being chased through those dark alleys, it resonates with the Third Man movies. Gives me a lot of that feel. So, I think that really, like for Paul, when you mentioned, noir is your happy place and your safe space, as it were. Maybe there's something to doing a science fiction noir story. Because I don't think they did a great job with it, but the Will Smith I Am Robot. I saw the movie. It is definitely, I haven't read the Asimov story. I know that it diverges wildly. I know that much from the novels. I know it's 3 short stories. But the idea of a whodunit murder mystery with robots, that's still some nice, that's a nice pulpy noir story. Honestly, you can just make something science fiction by having a murder mystery where the person who gets murdered, a copy of their memory has to solve the murder. So their brain is put into a robot body, and now they have to solve their own murder. That's right there. That's a science fiction noir story. All you need in order to make something, and that's the beauty of science fiction, is you just need one element, something technological, something alien, something from beyond. Anything. You just add one element to a story that we are very familiar with, and all of a sudden it feels new and fresh again. I think that's one of the strengths of mashups. If you really, really know the genre well of the main story you're telling, so noir very well. Because for instance, I haven't really written. You could say that Eye of the Gods has some noir elements to it, but I haven't really written or read a lot of noir fiction. I've been wanting to go back and read Dashiell Hammett and Philip Marlowe. Oh no, Philip Marlowe is the character. Dashiell Hammett, and there's another. Obviously, there's tons of pulp noir novelists, but there was somebody else besides Dashiell Hammett that I was thinking of that I wanted to read. But Dashiell Hammett is definitely high on the list of people I want to go back and read. Never read some Elmore Leonard, and who's the other one? The one who hasn't passed away. I know Elmore Leonard passed away, but then there's another guy, Leonard. Oh no, James Elroy. James Elroy is the other one I'm thinking of. James Elroy is another writer who's I've read. I think I've read like one. I've read like one or two Leonard Elmore novels. I've read like one James Elroy novel, and I've been wanting to go back and read all of their work. But that's how my brain works: is I find something and I read a book in that genre because I'm like, this is super interesting. I want to learn more, and then I keep doing that and doing that and doing that. Now I've got like a to read list like 1,000 miles long. Let me go back to the comments here because I've been ranting for a minute. Oh, and Chris, I do have thoughts on the make characters and make a comic out in order to start. I'll come back to that in a sec. So Red says, "Nah, I just want to make a cop who is a judge and and dread, but more futuristic. And at the end, the group of guys are swarming the protagonist to let the viewer decide if the protagonist died or not." That's your story. There you go. Very, very simple. I mean, that sounds like you got everything you need. Just do that. Paul says, wow, Jeremy, sci-fi noir mashup. I love it. And you know what? I would love seeing your work in it. You have a style that's perfectly set up for that. I'd love to check it out. I hope that you do something like that. You know, I was listening to the episode of Artcasters that you were on, like I think it was a month ago or so. And the fact that after finishing the latest Detective Perez, that you were like, I really need a break. Maybe short stories are a fun thing to do, but maybe it's fun to just, like, if you're going to take a break from comics for a little bit, just do illustrations. Maybe just doing a bunch of noir illustrations, like sci-fi noir mashup. Because that's the other thing. This whole piece, it's not like I'm drawing this and saying, this is the character design for my comic. It's more of me saying, I wanted, it's just concept art. I'm trying to draw it within, there's a template that I have for like my comic book covers. And the original sketch that I was working on, I was sketching it out. Let me turn off this layer. Turn this back on. I was originally sketching it, leaving space for a logo at the top, because I may repurpose it as a cover. But more importantly, it's just inspirational artwork to start, world building and developing. And who knows, maybe you don't necessarily have to dive into a comic book right away, but just doing some cool standalone pieces. Because your style, I think, obviously it lends itself to noir, and maybe just doing something where you've got like a noir character, they just got like a robot eye or a cyborg arm, or maybe they're a normal human looking detective, but they're walking through like a city lined with holograms. All that sounds super cool. Let's see here. Oh yeah, Walter Mosley. Paul mentions my favorite is Walter Mosley, Devil in a Blue Dress. I've read Devil in a Blue Dress, and oddly enough, I think that I've read a couple of short stories, and then I read a really weird novella that he wrote in the early 2000s that was not a noir novella at all. It was like a guy who was living in he was just trying to make money to pay for the property taxes for a house that his family left him while he's he's been unemployed for a number of years. He's just struggling to get by. It was a really weird, different from one of his books, and he said, yeah, this is intentionally me doing something weird and different. And I think oddly enough, Mosley has written some comics too, and I haven't read them, but I remember reading articles at some point where he had a comic book coming out. He's another one of those guys who I want to find the time to fall down the Mosley rabbit hole. But let's see here. Let me go to So Red says, why is this not showing? Red says, I'm mixing fantasy and sci-fi noir elements because it's going to be black and white. Wizards and futuristic robots and demons. And then Paul says, I'm thoroughly entertained by time travel, but I could never write it. I remember that was another thing that came up during that Artcasters live stream. Red says, I support you if you're ever going to, Paul. I think we all support you here. Whatever you plan to do now, because that's the thing. I'm always like, just do whatever you're going to do. I'm here for it and I want to see it. So I think we all are in favor of that. We look forward to whatever you do next. James says, Elmore Leonard. Yes, I really like Maximum Bob. See, I'm not deep enough into Leonard's work yet that I know Maximum Bob. And I mean, hell, to be honest, I've seen more adaptations of Elmore Leonard's work than I have actually read his books. For instance, Justified. I haven't watched City of I can't remember if it's City of Fire or whatever it's, or City of whatever not reboot, but the more recent Justified is. But I love the original Justified is one of my all-time favorite TV series. And in fact, just bringing it up makes me realize, yeah, that's what I need to do. Is I need to go back and finish that 6-part that Justified new series or more recent series. Let's see here. And Paul Pate says, a good idea, Red. Chris is stepping out for a minute, and he's probably back by now. Let's see. He says, you're right. He says, you're exploring designs for new characters, right? That is correct. Let's see here. Oh yeah, and Paul had said, "Good idea, Red," and he'd said, "Your story, not supporting me." But you know what? Supporting Paul is a great idea. Everyone, take note. But yeah, Red, I totally think that just the idea alone, I think you should run with that. That sounds very, very cool, very simple. And I like stories where you don't have everything wrapped up in a pretty little bow at the end. Like one of my favorite stories, I don't know if anyone else ever had to read this story when they were in school, but the Lady and the Tiger, where you've got that woman, this guy who's in love with the princess, and the king is like, nah, hell no, you ain't marrying my daughter. So he has the guy thrown into this pit, and there's 2 doors in the pit. Behind one door is a woman, and if he picks that door, he gets to live. And behind the other door is a tiger, and if he picks that door, he gets eaten. And at the end of the story, the princess that he's in love with, gestures towards one of the doors. And that's how the story ends. And I love that story because, it just has the question, does she love him so much that she wants him to survive even if she can't be with him? Or does she love him so much she can't stand the idea of him being with someone else and she sends him to his death? And I think that there's compelling arguments made for both. And that's, for me, the interesting thing is kind of like, I'm not going to get into the spoilers, but sort of the ending of not the Matrix, of Inception, Christopher Nolan's Inception, very much reminds me of that. Like those are my favorite endings, is when you look at it and you're like, well, when it leaves you with like an existential question. So it's not just a matter of not wrapping up all of the plot lines, but it leaves you with something where you're like, what happened? Where did this go? I'm really going to have to decide whether I want the lightning bolts or whether I want to just have him with braids for his braids coming out of his beard. And the other thing, when I originally sketched this before, I had his beard sort of, my idea, let me put an overlay layer on top. Originally, I had the idea that his beard was almost going to be like a cape sweeping down his front, and then whenever he moved, it would swirl off to the side. But after drawing this thumbnail over here, I almost feel like it would work better if no matter what his face is doing, his beard is like behind him. Like it is his beard becomes flowy like having flowing hair, except it's coming from his face instead of the top of his head. And these are the kind of things that I like working. This is the joy for me of character design is just sketching out all these little ideas, all these different variations, and just trying stuff out. Let's see here. Oh no. Jim Lujan is snuck into the chat. Now you know this is about to go off the rails. Off the rails. Let's see here. Paul says, yeah, he's written tons of stuff. 3 Fearless Jones novels are my faves. I think we're back to comics that Walter Mosley has written. Yes, Jim is watching you for the government. But the government has no idea what it's doing. So you're watching just to, I don't know, give them something to give them breadcrumbs. They don't know what they're doing. No one knows what they're doing. No one's going on. Taking notes on a meeting that no one's showing up to. Paul's like, everyone be very, very quiet. Jim is here. Oop. I'm telling you, Paul, watch it. Jim taking notes. Got check mark by your name. He taking notes. He taking notes. Watch yourself. Watch yourself. Oops. Make him a red beard. But back to the thing that Chris had mentioned earlier. And if you had to take off, hopefully you will catch the replay. But the idea of wanting to build a world and start a comic, but not knowing where to start. You can start with just one scene. Because I have realized trying to, and this is a problem that I'm having right now, even with the story I'm writing. I admire people who can just make up the entire story as they go along. Every time I've tried to do that, it's always handed me my ass, so I need to go back and work out the whole story. But where you work out that whole story from can be different for every creator. It doesn't matter if you have a scene that's the climax of the story. Doesn't matter whether it's a scene that's like the beginning of the story. Doesn't matter if it's just like a scene that's in your mind. Like if you're saying, if you already have the characters in mind, then you just put the character in any location, or just say, where would this character be? Not where would they be in like the beginning or end of the story, but just have them do something. Like if this is a character, think of something for them to do. Think of a conversation for them to have. Think of a fight for them to have. Think of someone for them to have to report to, or to answer to, or have a disagreement with that isn't necessarily a fight, or just have them fighting somebody. And if they're fighting somebody, what are they fighting about? And you start with that scene, and then as you build that scene out, maybe say, okay, who are they fighting? And who is that person? And why is that person fighting your main character? And start, working from there. And that's how, for me, that's sort of how the world building goes, is piece by piece. For me, that process tends to get sort of poured into my outlining. But I think that if you're having difficulty, if you feel stuck, the act of just doing it without necessarily the writing, and just doing it on with the idea of just building little pieces and seeing what happens when you add to those pieces. That's a very sensible way to approach it. You take your character and you're like, okay, who are they fighting? Why are they fighting this person? What are these arguments about? And then you say something as simple as, okay, that scene that you may have explored, what happened right before it? Where did your character come from to get to that fight? And that's for me how you start slowly building the world out is you just kind of back in and out of scenes. And what you can do is let's say that you do that and as you're doing it, you come up with an idea for another scene and the scene isn't right before, it isn't right after, it isn't the beginning and it isn't the end. It's just another scene somewhere in the narrative. You think of some other dramatic thing to happen or you think of a third character that's interacting with your character. You just build that scene too. And then what happens is you end up with like 3 or 4 scenes that are like pods, you know? There's scenes of things that you want to see in your book. And once you have that, that's where you sit down and you say, "All right, how do I connect these things?" That's the point when you really start saying that's where the outlining, the true outlining begins, is when you have all of these disconnected things and you decide, "All right, how am I going to connect them?" Um, I don't know if that's helpful at all, Chris, and I'm not sure if you're still in the chat, but I'm curious to hear what you think of that approach, whether that would be useful to you or not. Let's see here. So Red says, this reminds me of the short little story. I think I can fit in 3 pages because it's about a small little prince that ran away from a kingdom because he feels stuck and alone and alienated. You know, and that's really interesting because when you have a little story, haha, that's always a great thing. Paul says, start with the ending scene. And that's very good advice. You start with the because you know in the end you want the story to be exciting, and people sometimes hold back or they feel like they got to build up to the good shit. Sometimes it's better just start with the good shit, and then just add more good shit. And at the end, you're out of the story like, wow, this is all good shit. You know, I can't remember if it was not Ray Bradbury. It might have been who is it that I'm thinking of? Hell, it might have been Elmore Leonard. But there's a writer who said just skip the parts. He says just the secret to good writing is just leave out the boring parts. That's a horrible paraphrase. I'm sorry, I'm slurping coffee right into the microphone. You guys don't need all that. Put that in the back there. Let's see. And Red says the best part is there's no blood in the comic, which immediately for somebody who loves noir, I can see Paul being like, no blood. I'm skeptical. Fair. And Red says the ending is just him standing on a bridge. And he also says, it's okay, Jeremy. I like ASMR. And yeah, that's the best thing. Paul says, Red, I think you've got something. Just get going with it. It'll write itself. And here's an interesting idea and a way that I like to work out stories is give yourself a rough draft. So don't necessarily sit down and say, I'm going to make the story. And you're stressed about making it perfect. And you start it and you write a little bit and you're like, oh, well, this doesn't work. And then, that doesn't work. And then, you know, you'll end up like my ass where you end up spending like years trying to get the next project off the ground because you're just rewriting because you're not happy with it. Instead, in like a rough sketch form, maybe it's doing thumbnails. Maybe it's just taking a sheet of paper and dividing it into comic book panels. But instead of drawing in it, maybe you just write the panel description, like description of what's going to be in that scene. And from there, you can sit down and say, all right, does this story say what I want it to say? Because I think that is one of the hardest things in making comics is figuring out what it is you want to say. And that doesn't mean you have to have some grand theme figured out for your comic. It just means that this entertaining story that you're putting down, do these scenes add up to what my goals for making the story were? Yeah. which to me is very different than, say, trying to make a workout theme ahead of time. Because I think, from what I have heard from other writers, theme is better left if it emerges organically from the story. And what's more important is just keeping the reader entertained. So if you entertain the reader, what the story is about in terms of what made you choose that particular story to tell, that'll work itself out on its own. I don't think that that's an important thing to preconceive. And that's something that, but the reason why I say all this about having the rough draft is that, you know, you've got the scene of him staying alone on the bridge. You've got the scene where he decides that he wants to leave his kingdom. And I mean, honestly, you can just have a page of him feeling alone and alienated. You can have a page of him struggling with that, and maybe even talking to other people in the kingdom, and then you've got the page of him deciding to leave. It's just a matter of, you do that first version and you're like, okay, is this compelling? And if it's not compelling, that does not mean your story is bad. It means your story isn't finished. When I say finished, that doesn't mean it needs to be longer than 3 pages. It means you've done a first version, you've done that, and then you'd say, all right, if in order for this to feel compelling, what needs to change about each of the 3 pages? And you can do that if you're just writing down, text boxes instead of like drawing the full 3 pages. You can sit down and in an afternoon you can write out, 3, 4 different versions of your comic. And you do that a few times and you're like, oh, all right, I figured out what it is that I want this thing to be. It's just a matter of giving yourself space. Let's see here. We are already at 50 minutes. I know Jim is keeping track of time because he's watching all of us. Let's see here. And Paul with the encouragement, you can do it. And Red saying, thank you, Mr. Paul, for supporting me. And Jeremy, hey, we all want to see other fellow comic creators just get out and just tell the stories you want to tell, and just, share your thoughts and ideas and get them out in the world. So, Paul says, no problem. I love the idea of creating worlds and characters and stories. Plus, when you become famous, I can say I knew you would. It's always nice to be able to shout out, hop on them coattails, be like, hey, I saw him in the chat. I told him, get that 3-page story out there. And Red says, Jeremy isn't even trying, and he got a new piece for the museum. Well, we'll see if this one makes the archive. I still gotta. I mean, this is the weird thing. I get so lost in the process of sketching stuff, and what I need to really do is get back into the process of making a finished illustration and making a finished comic page. Because I get so, like, just this act of sketching out a possible face for this character is so satisfying for me that it's almost like, oh, okay, cool. I did something creative. I made some progress. Like, did I really make progress on my comic? Not really. I've got a lot more work to do. But this act of doing it was very, very joyful for me. And you guys are in no small part in no small part a piece of that, because having someone to share and talk to, you guys, while I'm going through this process, makes it that much more enjoyable. But like I said, I need to get back into the habit of having a finished page, which to a certain degree, that's kind of where doing this character sketch came out of, because it's me saying, all right, I want to make some progress on my comic. So let me work on some character designs. I mean, that whole sketch that I did was part of me sitting down and writing, and in the process of writing, coming up with a visual image of my version of Zeus and saying, "Huh, I want to explore him, sketch that out a little bit more." Although I will also tell you, I'm getting caught up in the color trap, and I should probably be doing this all in grayscale. Hmm, what if I have a little lightning bolt coming out of his, a little lightning bolt of skin, almost Harry Potter style. That lightning bolt doesn't look very good. Let me simplify. Hmm, hmm, hmm. But I don't know if, I ever properly, fully answered Chris's question about not knowing where to start. But I mean, to a certain degree, I think a lot of what we said to Red is really what I think applies in terms of, like, starting any new project. It doesn't matter where you start, all that matters is that you start. It's finding a place, picking a place, and then just sort of going in and seeing what happens. Let's see here. Zeus's lip in there. When I think about great concept design and character design, to be honest, what really excites me is Joe Madureira's, not his Battle Chasers work, which is awesome, but to be honest, his Darksiders video game series, which, you know, again, haven't played it because I haven't been gaming, but I bought the Art of Darksiders book, and for me, I would have loved to see an entire comic series that's just done black and white in the style of that book. Like, his just simple character sketches, character designs are so phenomenal. Um, and it's also interesting that when I draw, I tend to be really critical of my rough work, and I tend to be really critical of my polished work. But when I look at somebody like Joe Mad, and I see just his simple character sketches, I imagine he's probably critical of his own work, but I look at those and I'm like, "Dude, that's awesome. You don't need to spend a long time making a comic. Just do a comic in that simple stripped down style." Same as, Travis Charest. He used to do a web comic, if you can imagine it, called Space Girl, and the whole point of it was that he knows he takes a long time to draw comic pages. He knows he is a slow artist, and he knows he's a perfectionist. So he said, "I'm just gonna do this rough, simple, sketchy, not sketchy, but this loose, like, just, I don't know if it was ballpoint, but it was just a simple pen and ink comic. And it was fantastic. It was so good. And I mean, he did it for as long as he had time to do it. He eventually had to move on to other stuff. So he never finished it. I don't think it's been collected. Maybe it was collected in a convention sketchbook. But but regardless, I was just like, I see that, and when people tell me don't get caught up in, because I tell people the same thing I'm telling you guys: don't get caught up in details. Just keep going, keep it moving, keep it loose, keep it fun, keep it rough. And yet, I consistently do as I don't follow my own advice. If I had to give myself one piece of advice, it would be follow your own stupid advice, you dumbass. That's the advice I would give myself. Um, so we'll see if I can break this perfectionism streak. Let me see here. Let me do another sketch, because I'm obviously at this point, we're at an hour. I'm not at all getting to, what was it? The large pose. The thing that I want to work out is this face versus, and I'm gonna real quick just draw an ink line drawing. In fact, let me turn the opacity back up. You know what? That actually doesn't look bad with the ink lines. I've been wondering whether I should, whoops, try doing artwork where I'm dropping the line art altogether. But I feel like my nature, my tendency in terms of drawing is very ink liney. Like, what I would do, and it's stupid to have to do the same job twice, but I almost feel like I would do a sketch like this, then color it, and then draw ink lines on top, which is dumb because it's doing the same thing 3 friggin' times. Yeah, I gotta work on a stripped down style. But regardless, what I'm going to sketch out is just the alternate face where it's all the large dreadlocks of hair flowing. Let's see here. And Paul says Jill Mad's got style for sure. And Red says, dang, I forget the artist whose last name is Toth, but I love that guy, Art Noir, etc. And that guy is Alex Toth, and he is one of my favorite artists as well. I wish I had my copy. I don't have a lot of artist edition, IDW artist edition books because the books tend to be over $100. They are absolutely worth it because they're beautiful. They're reproductions at the size that the artwork was originally drawn, and they're shot from the boards. You see if the artist used whiteout, you see the whiteout, you see the sketches underneath, you see all of how they put the page together. It's the closest a lot of us are going to have to owning original art from some of these guys. But I have the artist edition of Alex Tilt's Bravo for Adventure, and I love that book. And you just sit there and you pour over it, and the storytelling is so good, the drawing is so good, the storytelling, everything about it is a masterwork. And I mean, I'll tell you, a lot of people have said this. I'm not saying anything new, but if you look at the comic creator Chris Samnee, he's like, to me, he's the modern day Alex Toth. I'm sure people have told him that, and I'm sure he seems like a guy who's relatively humble and would be like, I appreciate that. I'm influenced by Toth, but I'm no Toth. He is a Toth, because when I look, like, for instance, one of the other IDW artist editions I have is it's a 6-issue run of his work with Mark Waid on Daredevil, and those two books together are just a master class in the creation of comics. I mean, and I feel kind of silly saying that because there are so many great artists in the field of comics. There's just a ridiculous number. So to single out any particular artist or group of artists, there, no matter what, you're still always leaving out a host of ingenious creators. It's just one of the most talented creative fields in terms of art making. But yeah, Chris Samnee is one of those guys that just like for me, I could just read Chris Samnee work all day long. Like he's another one of those comic creators who I want to find time to read everything he's ever created. I don't have that time right now, but I absolutely want to because his craft of comic creation is so high. It's like he is somebody who's practicing the form of comics at the highest degree. Like I think of guys like him, and even though David Mazzucchelli does not put out comics very often, he's another one of those who is a master. I mean, he's a master who, you know, with Dark Knight, Batman Year One, and then and Daredevil Born Again, like he's done other comics work besides that. But with two works, he firmly ensconced himself in the history of comics. Yes, both of those are collaborations with Frank Miller, and that helps a lot. But but in his own right, you know, he's a master comic creator, and I'm frustrated that I can't find a lot of his other works in print. Like I think it's called Stuck Rubber Baby. Or Rubber Blanket. I think that might be what it's called. Stuck Rubber Baby, I think, is Howard Cruz. But anyway, he, yeah, like David Mazzucchelli. Because I'm thinking of who are people that I would say who I mentally put in the category of Alex Toth. And when I think of characters that creators that, in the same way that I personally am highly influenced by Bill Sienkiewicz, in my mind, I link Sienkiewicz with David Mack and Ashley Wood and Ben Templesmith, like guys that are painterly. Dave McKean, like I think of, because you know Dave McKean and Sienkiewicz are contemporaries, and then you look at a lot of the artists that came afterwards that were influenced by them. In that same way, I think of when I start with Toth, I think of Toth, I think of Samnee, I think of Mazzucchelli. And there are countless other comic artists that are influenced by all of them who are also amazing. But that's the other class of comic creator that I think of. Well, I mean, there's multiple classes of comic creator that I think of. And I don't know why I decided, but just because it's, you know, a character sketch, I decided to throw the lightning bolt going the other way just to see what it looks like. And another thing, frequently, I don't do this nearly enough. I should be flipping my canvas like every 5 minutes when I draw. That's what I should really be doing. As opposed to, this is kind of it came out of the way that I would make traditional comics, where I would draw my whole page layout, my whole roughs, and I would draw them on vellum, which is a transparent kind of a tracing paper material, but as durable as like typing paper. And then once I was done with that, I would go back and flip the page. And with that flipped page, I would try to draw and think at the same time. With that flipped page, I would go in and make corrections. Because it would be, I mean, it wouldn't be impossible, but for me, in the way I tend to work, it would have been more challenging to draw on vellum, lift it up, make corrections, and then go back and keep drawing. And that has sort of infected the way that I make things now, which is keep drawing until I have a completed sketch and then go back and do a whole corrective pass. But the beauty of working digitally is that I don't have to do that, and I should be flipping my canvas constantly. Red also says, Alex Toth is one of my drawing favorite number one. Well, if you love Toth, if you've never checked out Chris Somney's work, you should definitely check him out. And you should definitely check out David Mazzucchelli because you'll see why as soon as you read it. And oddly enough, one of my favorite non-superhero books is also David Mazzucchelli. He had a book called Asterios Polyp about a kind of a curmudgeonly art instructor having, I guess, post midlife crisis. But it's sort of about love and compassion and emotional trauma and narcissism. It's a very interesting, complex book about a not particularly sympathetic protagonist. And I will tell you that I don't feel like this sketch and that's something to say that I think is pretty common for a lot of artists. I don't think that this sketch nails what I wanted as much as the sketch above to the right. There's something about the shape of the beard that isn't doing it for me. The way the beard and the hair meld, I'm not in love with. All right. And this is the thing that I think happens during a lot of live streams is I start and I go in and I'm working on a piece and I get to a point where I'm like, this is going to need more work. I got to roll up my sleeves because the rolling up the sleeves is kind of the thing that that's what I'm most interested in sharing with you guys is not the finished, amazing, look what I made time lapse. It is the drawing and the redrawing and the pulling the reference. I didn't even show you guys. I've got like a little folder. This isn't impressive reference. This isn't where you're gonna look at it and go like, oh my god, it's gonna be so amazing. But hang on. Let me flip this back. When I was starting these sketches, in order to do the piece that I thought I was going to be doing, where I was going to show you, you know, this Zeus character in this pose, I wanted to kind of work out kind of a color palette. And my whole thing is I thought, oh, I'm going to draw this little thumbnail of the character. Then I'm going to work out his face. And then I'm going to draw a color thumbnail. And then I'm going to come back to this, fix the pose, and have the color all worked out for this piece. But, the devil is in the details. And the details are telling me there's more to do to work this character out. So let's see here. I see some spam in the chat. Some Twitch spam. And I don't want to show it. I'm trying to figure out how you do that thing where you, I don't know. give somebody a block or something. Oh, see, that's the thing. You can do that. You have those controls on YouTube. You don't have those controls on Twitch. Or at least you don't have those controls through StreamYard. I'm sure that Twitch has built-in things to block. Oh, by the way, I see Paul had to take off. So it's late in me telling you peace, Paul, but it was good to see you as always. He said, nice chatting with you, Red. All right, guys. I guess on that note, I should run as well. So let's come back to the old big screen. And guys, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed and you're a new viewer, hit that subscribe button. I live stream every Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If there's anybody else you know that enjoys just hearing artists talk about process, please forward it to them, share it with them. I love having company while I'm streaming, chatting with people. And, I always feel like I'm a work in progress. I'm growing and learning. But if anybody has any art questions and I can help answer, I will do my best to point you in the direction where answers may lay. So I appreciate that. And if you would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, we do something called Artist Office Hours. People can come with their questions, come with comments, hang out. There's a voice channel in the Discord. So instead of typing, we can actually talk and have a conversation while I'm streaming. I do studies from art books during those streams. I've been doing a long running series on Walt Reed's The Figure. I'm kind of going through page by page and analyzing and breaking down because it's part of my process of growing and learning. So in addition to that, you get access, like I said, to our Patreon exclusive Discord server, online digital archive where you can read my comics. All of that for as little as $2 a month. There's higher tiers for higher rewards, but $2 a month gets you in. So head on over there and check that out. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which inspire me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally, you can go to Comixology. You can go to Amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. If you read digitally on the Kindle, you can pick them up there as well. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. I'm the artist, writer, penciler, inker. Gray toner. I did everything pretty much but pushed it through the printing press. This one is a standalone psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can also pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is a retelling of Lucifer's Fall from Heaven as a Western. Volume 1, it's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains the conclusion to the series, issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, character designs, thumbnails, page layouts, photo reference. I basically show you how I put the entire comic together. And in addition to that, if you want to see what's inside the books before you pick them up, go to the homepage of my YouTube channel. There are book flip-throughs. If you scroll into the flip-through section, you can see what's inside. All right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you spending time with me while I'm drawing, hanging out. That's it for now. Go be creative.